have 30 seconds per question. We'd like to keep the questions one per person, and then whoever you direct your question to, we'll give them 3 minutes to answer, and the other person 1.5 minutes to respond as well. All right? Can we have the first person?
Can you just add to that rule that, just so the audience knows, the more you ask one side a question, the more that side gets to speak, right? So just so you know.
Thanks so much. Sir? 1 second, we'll turn your mic on very quickly. Okay, there we go.
I've got 2 questions, but I will be satisfied if I can go for one.
Thank you.
If possible, afterwards,
Thank you, sir.
Sir, Jewish Zionists and Christian Zionists often, as you've done, want to babble about the intent and possibility of whether it occurred regarding ethnic cleansing and genocide. Sir, people are liars. Have you never seen footage, photos and live footage of what Gaza looks like? Hundreds of hospitals razed to the ground, churches, mosques, buildings, 5-story, up to 10-story buildings, flattened. You've never seen that? You know, we've got a simple saying in English. The taste of the pudding, something like this, is in the eating. I think you saw the photos, and I think you saw the footage, but you turned and denied that it happened.
Thank you, sir. Mark, if I can ask you to respond?
Sure. So, no, I'm not in the game of denying the damage done to Gaza. There's clear footage of the destruction to the infrastructure, and it's incredibly tragic. As I've said, one of the reasons why you have that is, firstly, the intractable stance from Hamas. So you wouldn't have had that destruction if Hamas had back the hostages and put down weapons. Yeah. So you've had this enormous attack on...
All right. No, sorry, sir. If we can just if we just allow Mark to respond. Okay. All right.
No, so I answered the question. Okay. So what I've said is that I don't deny that there's been enormous destruction in Gaza. The question is, who's responsible for it? And the people, obviously, like there's, well, we've said 70,000 people. And so the question is why and who's responsible? And so 20,000 of them we've said are probably militants, and then the others are civilians. And it's tragic the civilians have lost their lives. And I say the reason why that a lot of them lost their lives is because Hamas surrounded them with that. So you are right to be enraged at the loss of civilian life, but you should target your ire at the true genitors of that suffering, which is the terrorist group Hamas.
All right, thank you. Dot, if you'd like to respond.
Okay. I'm very disappointed in Mark. He's insulting our intelligence. He spoke about visiting the sites of the Hamas attacks, seeing some destruction, and saying, this proves genocide. But 80% of Gaza's flattened. Oh, that's not a genocide. That's just war is hell. Oh, well. You should be ashamed, sir. And Israel never said that they're going to stop the war when you give back the hostages. Hamas offered them the ceasefire agreement, and there was actually, they formed the ceasefire agreement in January 2024, and it was releasing half the hostages by that point in time. And if they had continued it, the rest would have gone, presumably. But no, who restarted the war? It was Israel, because Israel said, we want the destruction of Hamas, and as they've also said, we want the Palestinians to voluntarily go to another place. And of course, to help them voluntarily make that free will choice, we're going to blockade everything, food, water, clothing, everything, from entering that place, including baby formula, so they can make a voluntary choice. So please, sir, you can say anything you want to us, but please don't insult our intelligence.
All right. Young man, if you could ask your question.
So I'd like to ask Abdullah a question. You talked about the so-called intent of the Hamas people on October the 7th to not target civilians, which I don't believe for a second. But is it true that in Iran, in wanting to have Sharia law as the kind of apex of your global caliphate type
Thank you, sir.
goal, is it true that the killing of all Jews throughout the world is called for?
Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat that last bit? I didn't hear
If
it.
you could just repeat your last part.
Is it true that the killing of all Jews throughout the world is called for in the Quran?
I tell you
Start.
what, if you find the Quran, any verse of the Quran saying the killing of all Jews, I'll give you 50,000 pounds or 100,000 rand if you'd like. All right? Because that is a slur and a lie against the Quran, and it's no different to the, you used to hear in World War II the Nazi slurs saying that Jews want to dominate the world. It's in their Talmud. Oh, any reference? Trust me, bro. So I tell you what, quote me the verse, quote us the verse before you make such accusations. But I'll tell you this, if your claim is that Muslims are somehow compelled or wanting to kill all the Jews around the world, was there almost 1 million Jews, or more than 1 million Jews in the Muslim world protected by us, sought refuge with us, to the point that Theodor Herzl, the father of political Zionism, said that he praised the Middle East, praised the Ottoman Caliphate, and said, you've always been kind to the Jews. That it's a natural place for Jews to go to. Why would Jews want to go to a place where people want to kill all of them? Because they don't.
Thank you. Mark, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so I suppose the passage that often gets cited on this, which is mentioned in the Hamas Charter, is that the rocks and the trees will cry out that there is a Jew hiding behind them and that you should kill them. And so someone might draw the inference that the text doesn't think that Jews are just like everybody else and are deserving of protection, when even Mother Nature itself says, kill these people. So there's a reason why I said what he said.
Okay. All right, so if we can have our next question.
Hi, so my question is for Mark. Mark, you said earlier that for genocide to be plausible, there needs to be the intent and the underlying acts for the genocide, right? But Mr. Andalusia has asked you many times that the Israeli government themselves, Netanyahu, and you keep dodging it, they themselves referring to the Palestinians as Amalek, they themselves have referred to attacking, they themselves have expressed the intent to kill the Palestinians, and then they've gone on a bombing campaign for years. So how have they not intended to kill everyone? Because they themselves say they're going to kill everyone.
Time.
And they themselves have bombed everyone. So how can you still say that there's not a genocide happening in Gaza?
Okay, Mark, your 3 minutes to respond. You can move a little closer to the mic.
Sure. So the Israeli government has been quite clear about drawing a distinction between Palestinians and Hamas. You have had, just after October 7th, eruptions of anger after what happened, and so it's not unexpected that people would say things that are impulsive or look like they're sort of upset with everybody. But it's quite clear that the mandate of the state has not been to target civilians, it's been to target Hamas. I mean, there are two objectives: rescue the hostages and eradicate Hamas. If the directive was genocidal, it would be eradicate all Palestinians, which would be what's required. So if you look at what the Genocide Convention says, it's not that there's no prohibition on trying to eradicate a military group or a terrorist group. It's in eradicating an ethnic group or religious group. That, of course, would be prohibited, but targeting Hamas as that group is not prohibited. So there's a distinction to be drawn, and the state has drawn it. You might have some individuals, maybe there's examples of soldiers saying things, songs being sung, but it's not the policy of the state. And in order to have genocide met, it has to be a state policy. It can't be that some loudmouth sort of says, well, you should kill everybody. That's not sufficient.
Okay, thank you. So, if you'd like to respond.
Chair of the Israeli government's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, Boaz Bismuth, we must not forget that there are no quote-unquote innocent civilians. He put the quotes there. And then he says, there is no place for any humanitarian gesture. The memory of Amalek must be erased. Benjamin Netanyahu then uses it twice. You must not forget what Amalek did to you twice. President Isaac Herzog said, it's an entire nation out there that's responsible. It's not true that this rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved, it's actually not true. So how did Israelis understand these rhetoric about Bezalel Smotrich? There are 2 million Nazis in Gaza. Yoav Gallant, defense minister, he said, we're imposing a complete siege on Gaza. Everyone, no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. We're fighting human animals and we're acting accordingly. So we're targeting all of them. And he's saying the reason why we're targeting all of them is because they are human animals. He said, Gaza, we're going to release all restraints. Gaza won't return to what it was before. We will eliminate everything. If they tell your intent, why don't you believe them, Mark? Why don't you believe them when they say expressly their intent? Quite genocidal to me.
Thank you so much. Can we have our next question?
Can you hear me? Hi, Mark. Hi, Abdullah. This is sort of an open question where both of them have a response. Similar to how we've been doing questions. It's an open one where both of them do have a response. It's not directed to anyone, but you'll get it. I'll try to be quick. Okay, so you both have great experience in your respective fields. I would like to know, with the knowledge that you have and the differing interpretations on the conflict, what would you like to see happen over the next few decades, assuming the relevant parties all comply, like the United Nations, the ICJ, the Israeli government, Hamas? What's the ideal vision for the region? And please try to respond with concrete policies or plans of actions and avoid PR answers or political rallies. What would you like to be done?
All right, so he hasn't directed it at anyone. Can I allow 2 minutes and 2 minutes for each to answer? All right. Can I start with you, Ustad?
Okay, so you say, well, what do people want to see happen? So I talk about the facts as they are. Benjamin Netanyahu and others have constantly talked about removing the Palestinians voluntarily from Gaza and while destroying their water infrastructure, while not allowing medical aid to go in, while there are people on a major calorie deficit, i.e. starvation and famine, according to multiple UN reports, as well as Amnesty International. So they've stated what they want to see happen. Now, he cites Hamas charter. Hamas uses a hadith from the Prophet Muhammad talking about a future time where there'll be a battle between a certain group of Muslims and a certain group of Jews. So they say that we see that our fight with Israel might encounter this, but it doesn't say all Jews will be killed and all Muslims will do the killing. It talks about a future battle somewhere, we don't know where. What it does say, they want to see happen, so I can only tell you what they say they want to see happen. Palestine under the wing of Islam, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews live peacefully. I'm paraphrasing, but they say Muslims, Christians, and Jews. If they want to kill all Jews, why is it that their stated intent is that Muslims, Christians, and Jews live in Palestine peacefully? That doesn't make any sense. And of course, because there was confusion, presumably they upgraded their constitution to 2017, where they said explicitly, we're not fighting Jews because they're Jews, we're fighting Zionists because they're occupying the land. And once they end the occupation, then the fighting ends. That's what their stated intent is. So presumably, if the occupation of Palestinians ends, then Hamas appears to say they will stop fighting. So I can only speculate as to, based on their stated intent.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
So I assume that the time goes after the clapping finishes. Okay, so I assume you're actually asking both of us what we would like. And I think what you'd ideally like is, firstly, for Hamas to be totally dismantled in the region. And then need a denazification project. So I think you have a populace that's been brainwashed and fed all sorts of lies about Jews and Zionists. If you sort of look at school textbooks, you see lots of that kind of thing. You had a similar denazification project in Germany, right? So, how do you have a population that was, living under the Nazi regime that then becomes, one of the most peace-loving nations in Europe, and returns to its erudite status? You have to have, a rebuilding that goes on. You have to have, education that goes on. And so I think the idea of being able to first ensure that your populace is peace-loving and actually does want to, live in this sort of utopic society where people respect each other as equals, if that is what is desired, then you should take steps to ensure that that occurs. I think you cannot have genuine statehood until you have those things in place. Now, Israel is in the game of trying to ensure peace with its neighbors, and was busy doing that quite successfully before October 7th. And one of the reasons why Hamas launches that attack is to derail the peace process. It doesn't
30
like
seconds.
the idea of the Israelis being friends with the Saudi Arabians and the Jordanians and the Bahrainians. That the entire Arab world has sort of called on Hamas to dismantle itself, and recognizes that that terrorist movement has no place in the region if you care about the Palestinians.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we have our next question, please?
Mark, I just noticed something you mentioned that I thought was a little disingenuous when you mentioned Iraqi Jews simply leaving Iraq. That kind of ignores the fact that there were social political implications to living in Iraq during this time, as well as the fact that there were Zionist militias that actively bombed synagogues in Iraq to make Iraqi Jews feel unsafe within their own country. And my actual question is, my cousin has, and my little cousins have Jewish Ashkenazi ancestry, while one of my best friends' grandma was literally kicked out of their house in Palestine. Why is it that my little cousins, whose grandparents have never been to Israel, are technically allowed to just claim citizenship, while my friend was never allowed to even visit?
Okay. Mark, over to you.
Yes, so if you think about the rules of citizenship that the Israeli government sets up, it's to say that if you were Jewish enough to be killed by the Nazis, which is basically 1/16 Jewish, then you are Jewish enough to start a new life here. If you think about how Israel starts, you really have swamp and desert. I mean, this is not desirable territory. You had many people who were professors and doctors who became bricklayers and farmers. And the idea was that it's important to have this safe haven for a people that have, suffered thousands of years of persecution. So that's one of the reasons why the state has that rule. As I say, with regards to the Palestinians, there's no state for Palestine. And of course, there's good reason to think that it would destabilize the only Jewish state on the planet to allow a right of return, because you have people who are hostile to the values enunciated by the Israelis. And there are many states in that region. If you want to lead a flourishing life under Sharia law, you can have your pick of states. The idea that the Jews don't deserve one speck on this planet just strikes me as insane. If you think about the Christians that lived in Bethlehem, it was an 80% Christian city. They've been ethnically cleansed out of Bethlehem. I've brought this up on many occasions, Islamic states are not tolerant of other groups practically now. We do not have Christians leading flourishing lives in Syria, in Iran, even in Egypt. There are about 50 Jews who live in Egypt. So,
Okay.
Right. Can we just keep that down to a minimum, please?
So it seems that the sort of opposition to the state of Israel is the idea that Jews should have no place where they can be safe. They're not safe in the countries they live in around the world, and they shouldn't be safe in the one country that they can call a home. And that's why the project is to try and dismantle it. The sort of line about, we don't have a problem with Jews, we have a problem with Zionists, that's sort of like me saying, I have a problem with Muslims, I have a problem with Islamists. It's rhetorical. It's quite clear that there's an enormous overlap between Jews and Zionists. There are Christians who are Zionists as well, and I note that organizations like the Mandela Foundation have declared war on Christian Zionists, and that's a betrayal of Mandela's own values, who himself was a Zionist and Israel had a right to exist.
All right, thank you very much. Scott?
The majority of Zionists are American Christians. They're the majority. So why do you associate Zionists with being Jews? You could be anyone and be a Zionist. But the problem is, Bethlehem, that's a lie. Consult any Palestinian Christian. And there's actually multiple churches based in Bethlehem that have condemned the Israel persecution. They say the reason why Christians are leaving is because of Israeli occupation of Palestinian Christians. Don't lie. You're right, don't lie. So imagine someone saying, you black South Africans, you have all kinds of black African countries to go to. Why do you have to be here? You just don't like the Boers to have the only Boer state in Africa or in the world. That's what you sound like. That's the ridiculousness of that argument. Palestinians are Arabic speakers, but they're natives. Egyptians are Arabs, but they don't come from Arabia. They're the descendants from the pharaohs and from the ancient Egyptians. Palestinians are natives. Why should they go somewhere else? You secretly, it seems, you secretly support Benjamin Netanyahu's idea. The only solution is expulsion. Another expulsion of the Palestinians. No, sir. No.
30 seconds. All right. Let's move on to our next question. Thank you very much.
Question for Mr. Andalusi is, why is this war in Gaza the priority issue for almost all Muslim activism or public speaking that I hear, at the same time that other things are happening in the world? For example, 1 million Muslims imprisoned in China. I haven't heard any Muslim leader object to that. 1.5 million people killed, most of them Muslims, in Yemen, Syria, and Sudan. I don't hear much about that. But also just with the alliance with woke, people who are advocating killing of unborn people, children, who I understand is completely against Muslim teaching, but they're happy to work with these people. So my question is, why is that the paramount issue?
Scott, over to you.
Okay. Why is it when there's so many countries around the world where people are being oppressed, massacred, denied the right to vote, why does the world focus on South Africa, part of South Africa, so much, to the point that they were actually suspended, de facto suspended from the UN? No other country has been suspended from the UN. Why are you picking on white South Africa? Because it purports to be a liberal democracy. And if you can allow a liberal democracy to deny the rights of a people and still be a liberal democracy, that's a liberal democracies everywhere, on principle. So that's why Israel is quite an exceptional state, because it's the only state that gets $4 billion plus from America, money, no sanctions from any Western state, and denies it's based on racial supremacy. So China doesn't say it's based on racial supremacy, neither does Russia. They do horrible things, but Israel is based on racial supremacy. So that's why we talk about it, and of course anyone would talk about it. You know, I want to just segue into something else, which is, we talk about denazification of Germany. That was the solution. But all Germans, at the end of denazification, got to be part of one state and could all equally vote. At the end of whatever process he wants with the Palestinians, he denies the Palestinians a right of equality, and he denies them their own state. Benjamin Netanyahu said they won't get their own state. So where is the only solution for the Palestinians? It seems like the only solution that you want for the Palestinians is a final solution.
Thanks very much. Mark, would you like to respond?
So a couple of thoughts. The one is that the real reason why you don't find discussions of the persecution of Muslims by states like China or by other Muslims is that it's only news when they are Jews, that there's a sort of selective problem here. I don't see much sort of ranting and raving about other states that are, ethnically arranged. I don't hear claims that the Greeks shouldn't be allowed to be a state for Greeks only, or they shouldn't have a right of return for Greeks. So I think that sort of would explain the sort of the emphasis issue. Just remind me of the last point that you made.
Well, I said that you deny the Palestinians one state equal solution. They're denied a separate state, as you just argued. So what's left for them?
Yeah, so my view is that if you have a thorough denazification process, and by the way, the Germans didn't live in one state, they lived in two. It was broken.
But let's say you did. Let's say you had this so-called denazification process that you allege that the Palestinians somehow need. Yeah. What do you see as the solution for them? No separate state and no one state equal rights. What's left?
30 seconds.
I think if you did have a sort of change in the population's attitudes, then you could have a separate state. The question will be about those borders, and obviously the Israelis have been engaged.
So Gaza and the West Bank, you'd give the Gaza and West Bank back to the Palestinians?
No, I think you'd have to have a debate about what territory. You'd have to do territory swaps. You'd have to, work out.
It's 22% of their original homeland. You're saying that's not good. That's not enough, that's too much for them. They should have even less.
Not necessarily on the ratios of the space, but my point is that you could have two states. You'd have to have some discussion about where those states would
like
be.
Bantustans, yeah.
No, it could be a contiguous.
Those are separate. South Africa could be separate states. Did it not? The Bantustans were separate states for the Black African people. Is that not what the apartheid government argued?
Well, the question is whether you want a Palestinian state that you think is not a Bantustan but is an autonomous state.
Okay, that's our time for this question. We have our final question. We have two more. Okay, go for it, sir.
I'm one of them. Mr. Oppenheimer, Mr. Oppenheimer, as an academic, I'd like to make a comment that I ask for your objectivity. As much as what you're accusing Hamas of doing, Irgun and Haganah did exactly the same thing against a British mandate to form the State of Israel. They committed acts of terror. I'd like you to admit that the founding of the State of Israel was on the acts of terrorism. Secondly, sir, there is a gentleman, academic like you, middle class, American physician, was named is Baruch Goldstein. He got up on a pre-dawn prayer, massacred 29 Muslims at prayer. Just like you, an academic, not an illiterate Arab from a refugee camp. What the Israelis are doing to the Arabs is same what the Germans did to the Jews, to you all in Germany. If they kill 6 million German Jews, give them part of Germany, not part of Palestine. Thank you.
Right, Mark.
So Baruch Goldstein would be an interesting case. So it's incredibly rare to have that. And two, Baruch Goldstein is denounced by Israelis, that there's no shrine to Baruch Goldstein. That sort of shows you the difference in attitude. Whereas if you are a suicide bomber, then you are seen as a martyr for a cause, and your family will be paid, and you'll be seen as having done something heroic. So the Baruch Goldstein case shows you that Israelis condemn the killing of innocent lives, including Muslim lives, whereas Hamas, on the other hand, celebrate that kind of behavior. I think also to draw parallels between the Haganah and the Irgun versus Hamas, the methods that are used are just entirely different. You don't have the Irgun strapping, dynamite to their chests and blowing up civilians. You have attacks on the British, but to say that they're sort of equivalent groups just strikes me as detached from reality.
All right. Thank you very much. Ustad?
Okay, so I'm going to quote from the book by Peter Bernhardt. He said this: a 2006 paper by two University of Toronto sociologists reached the conclusion that most Palestinian suicide bombers, quote unquote, gave up their lives to avenge the killing of a close relative as retribution for specific attacks against the Palestinian people or as paybacks for perceived attacks against their culture. A 2014 study by Israeli political scientists determined that among both Palestinians and Israelis, individual level exposure to terrorism and political violence against them or their families makes the subject populations less likely to support peace efforts. So clearly, violence begets violence. That's the cause of suicide bombing, which Hamas, apparently they have stopped anyway. But the Palestinians weren't the first people to invent bombing attacks against marketplaces and crowded areas. It was the Zionists. Irgun pioneered this. Menachem Begin led the Irgun. And how was Menachem rewarded? Was he punished or judged? No, he was made the fourth prime minister of Israel. That's what they do to their terrorists, reward them.
Thank you very much. All right, we have our last and final question, sir.
Two. Well, in the interest of time, I've decided to really write down my questions.
We have 30
based
seconds,
on
sir.
what you said earlier on. Just want to probe the necklace comparison, because you have used that comparison, I think 2-3 times based on your book, and before you were talking about the Baptistans. Now my question is, are you aware that necklacing in South Africa was widely condemned, including by liberation leaders? Do you then accept that it was never legitimized as lawful resistance, but recognized as a mob violence and moral failure?
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Start.
I was simply quoting what this South African Jew writer was saying, where he simply said that the expectation by the white community that there would be a genocide against whites once equality with blacks was given was unfounded. That's the only reason why I mentioned. I quoted from him. I didn't even know the full extent of necklacing. But the point is, if the argument of the white apartheid regime had been we can only have peace with black South Africans when we eliminate the ANC and their militant wing, Umkhonto MC's way, which did do terror attacks and targeted civilian people. You wouldn't have had peace. You wouldn't have the ability for peace. So the question is, if we can create peace by giving everyone equal rights here in South Africa, and imperfect though South Africa is, why can't we do that in Palestine? And there's one major block, and it's the same block that was here in South Africa. Because people like him were afraid that the Zionists will lose their racial supremacy in Palestine, and that's why they don't want to give people rights and freedom.
Mark, would you like to respond?
So I note there was no condemnation of the necklacings, and I haven't heard a condemnation of any of the other horrendous activities perpetrated by Hamas from my interlocutor. So I can only assume that even that this has been asked of you repeatedly, that you think there are no side constraints, that people can do all sorts of barbarous acts, immense acts of torture, of killing of civilians in the name of their just cause. And that strikes me as a terribly immoral position to hold. And it also shows your sort of lack of understanding of the South African landscape to come to an audience here and to celebrate the idea of necklacing when it has been so roundly condemned. If we look at Israel itself, you do find that you actually have a plural democracy where Muslims, Jews, Druze live together. They're represented within the Knesset, that you have Arab judges, that you have as Arab doctors who look after Arab patients and Jewish
30
patients.
seconds.
And so the sort of dream that you have of this pluralist society is alive in Israel. And sort of describing this as an apartheid state is to sort of not really understand what apartheid is, not to really understand what Israel is.
All right, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you kindly for attending tonight's debate. I think it was really informative. Thank you for taking the time. I know it's a Friday night. Not everybody has the time to do that. We're going to round up tonight's session, and we're going to ask each panelist to spend 5 minutes of their time to round up their opinion and their thoughts about tonight's debate. Mark, can I start with you?
So, firstly, I want to say it's been a very interesting event. It's a hot topic, it's an emotional topic. I understand that people have very strong feelings about this. I'm delighted that we've managed to have a largely civil conversation, that we've been able to speak to each other, exchange ideas, hear from the crowd, engage you. I think often one of the things that's become rarer and rarer on many issues is that people only hear their side of the story, and I think it's nice that people who've held different views and I get to hear both sides. So I really sort of celebrate what the organizers of this event have done, and I think these sort of things are well worth doing. I imagine there'll be lots of disagreement about some of the things we've said in terms of the norms that are put forward and the facts. There's a recording of this video, so people are welcome to sort of fact check each other online. I think that's probably the appropriate place to do it. Ultimately, the question that was sort of asked of us today was, is the war in Gaza justified or genocide? And I've given an argument for why it sort of meets the criteria for a justifiable war by looking at the legitimate war aims of the Israelis and why what has happened doesn't meet the sort of threshold of genocide, that you don't have data specialis. You might have had inflammatory statements that are made by various individuals, but you definitely don't have a state policy of the extermination of Palestinians as a people, either in intention or in acts. The Amalek quote, by the way, is one of those things that's sort of badly misinterpreted in that it refers to, you should remember what Amalek did to you, which refers to the Israelis being caught by surprise by Amalek and attacked. And so that's where it refers to. There's an Amalek monument outside of the International Court of Justice, and sort of Amalek is sort of referred to, like the Nazis were seen as a modern Amalek, and so Amalek refers to Hamas, not the Palestinian people. I think we have some agreement between us, which appears to be the idea that it would be good for people who have different faiths and different beliefs to be able to live alongside each other in peace. And I think that hopefully most people feel that they want that. I'm not convinced that Hamas want that, and based on their conduct and based on what's been said in their charter and based on what's said in interviews. But it would be good to have people living alongside each other like they do in Israel. And I think, as I've said, if you did have a sort of thorough change in attitudes, you could have either states living alongside each other, and that would be a sort of desirable state of affairs.
Are you okay? Would you,
Yeah, I'll-
just about 2.5 minutes? Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll start over to you.
Sorry, before I continue, maybe I misheard. So, did you say I celebrate the idea of necklacing? Did you say that? Did you say I celebrate the idea of necklacing?
No, I said that you refused to denounce
Did
it.
he say that? Okay, then you can start my time.
Okay, go ahead.
Did I celebrate the idea of necklacing, or did I just quote a South African Jewish writer? This is a lie and slander. You lie brazenly to us as much as the government you defend lies to all of us. He said, if the white people in South Africa, the Boers were the majority, there wouldn't be apartheid in South Africa. They would just say, okay, we can all live together, no problem. Because when he says, I wouldn't mind living together, we all support the idea of living together, but what Zionism says is, sure, we can all live together as long as you are not more than us or too many. Then we don't want to live with you. We're going to bomb you. We're going to put walls around you. We're going to starve you, kill you until we expel you. That's what Zionism actually says, not what you claim it does. Notice in what he says, he's actually revealing about himself what he says. He says, he doesn't say we will give one state where Jews and Arabs and Christians and all kinds can all live together. He doesn't say, he said a separate state, then he said with autonomy. He didn't use the word independence because they don't want an independent Palestinian state next to them. They want Bantustans, like the apartheid regime said. Regimes which are not independent, but they are autonomous. It's a place, a concentration camp for the undesirables with a different skin color to us. That's what he wants. And Abba Eban, who the foreign minister of Israel, said, and he was the guy who pioneered the idea of anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, he said not everyone gets a right to self-determination, and it should be denied the Arabs of the West Bank. So they've been quite open with what they truly believe. They don't want the Palestinians to have self-determination because, as I've said again and again and again, they want their racial supremacy in the land of Palestine, and it doesn't matter who they have to bulldoze over, literally, to get it. All right. And there was an article with Israeli soldiers mentioning to journalists that they actually literally bulldozed Palestinians in Gaza, alive and dead. So he says that Israel wants peace. It's a typical thing that the Zionists say. And yet there was multiple Arab peace initiatives. This was all the Arab world, including even the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Conference, and to the point even Iran was actually part of it, but like they said they weren't going to object, but they were like neutral about it. They said, okay, Israel, I tell you what, we will all normalize with you. Every Arab government and even the Muslim governments will all normalize relations with you, recognize your right to exist, everything, peace, and the end of any conflict. All you have to do is go back to the 1967 borders and allow the Palestinians to have their independence. Fatah said it, PLO said it, and even Hamas has said that, right? Even Hamas. And they changed their constitution in 2017, and they reiterated as a means of national unity, they said they will go with this plan. Who scuppered this deal? Israel. They said, no, we want the West Bank, we want control, we can't trust non-Jews. Because the secret behind Zionism, most people don't realize is, the premise of Zionism is that Jews must rule themselves, right? No one else can rule them, even if they are the majority, the non-Jews, the Jews must rule themselves because ultimately you can't trust non-Jews. That's the premise of Theodor Herzl's arguments and writings. You can't trust non-Jews. So how could non-Jews be expected to live in a state where the premise of that state is that they can't be trusted and so they must be controlled? This is the basis for racial supremacy and racial subjugation. So I will end with this, relating to what we discussed. There is a genocide going in Gaza, and the ANC's argument at the court case you had was that the Kill the Boer was not genocidal because no one understood it like that.
30
the
seconds.
the context was no one understood it like that. It was clear, it was metaphorical. And yet, poll after poll in Israel, for example, the Hebrew University concluded 64% of Israelis believe there are no innocents in Gaza, 47% believe that the Gaza should be conquered and everyone massacred, just like Amalek. So the Israeli people understand very well what Amalek means and what the genocidal statements of the politicians mean. It's time the whole world see through your lies and see that this is genocide and there's no hiding it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for coming through and attending this debate. Really appreciate it. I would just like to, a special announcement from IPCI. There is an event tomorrow. It's happening at 12 Felt Road in Belgravia Estate. Ustad Abdullah will be attending, and that will start at about 12 o'clock. So we do request for those who can attend, please do as well. Once again, please give our panelists a round of applause. That is how we draw tonight's debate to a close. We ask you to please take a safe drive home. We appreciate your time. From all of us here in Cape Town, we wish all our Hilaal TV viewers a great evening as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.